You know what I'm going to say here, huh? Almost OEM, you know, looks factory, doesn't it? But it isn't. So watch the video, the entire video, and see what I did. And subscribe. Oh, I really don't feel like working on this thing today. But I do feel like welding something. So, I guess I'm going to do an axle beam reinforcement. And I don't know if that's the right name for that part, but I call it an axle beam. So, an axle beam it is. Let's reinforce it. I guess I gotta drop that son of a gun back out again. Now I got all the grease and grime wiped off of this thing, I can see what's going on here. This really isn't that bad of a design. They did use some fairly thick steel to make it. It's roughly 12 gauge. And they put a few little stitch welds here and there to lock the two pieces together. So the bottom looks like that, the top looks like that, but it's kind of the same setup. The top just has that fancy arch to it. So what I'm going to do to reinforce this is clean the entire seam up and then weld it solid across. And do that on the bottom and the top. Then I'm going to take another piece of steel, bend it like a U or like use a half round or something, and basically bridge this seam. So I'll weld it across here and the piece of metal will come across to the other side and I'll weld it across there. I'll do that on the bottom and the top as well. When I do the top, I'm going to try to follow these arches. So roughly all I'm going to do is like thicken up the entire beam. So let's get this going. Heck yeah! I now have to cut this pipe in half. And I have to cut it in half as in like 2 half circles. I gotta cut the entire length of the pipe, rotate it 180, and cut the entire length again. To do that, this pipe has a welded seam in it. I'm gonna use that welded seam as my starting point. I'm gonna put a mark on the face, then transfer the mark directly above it so each half is the same. Then rotate it over, do the same thing. Start at the weld seam, go directly above it, put another mark. Once the faces are marked, I'm going to transfer the marks to the circumference of the pipe and do it on both sides. Then, once I have the circumference marked, I'm going to just take a straight edge and go mark to mark and draw a line clear across the pipe. Rotate it over, do the same thing, mark to mark, draw a line straight across the pipe. Then I'll take my angle grinder, cut on the line, rotate it, cut on the line, and I'll have 2 halves. crap, I might be able to use that. So I went ahead and did all this grinding off a camera. Really, it was the same thing as this one here. Just the angles were a tad bit different because the spindle comes up at an angle. So this is an over 90, that's an under 90. But they weren't that far off from each other. And it was like before. Got it sat in the corner, saw what hit, cut that amount out, and just kept working it until I got my center lines lined up. So really it was just a lot of grinding and test fitting, you know, constantly. Got my center marks lined up. And then I went ahead, took all these measurements and designs and transferred it to this one over here. Now, I'm not going to form this side yet. I'm going to wait till I get all this paint taken off and weld the seam. Now, welding these seams, I'm not going to weld the entire seam anymore. They welded on these little reliefs here, there, you know, but there's open ones on this side. So I'm going to weld just those. The reason for that is this tubing, it just barely clears that actual seam right there. And I'm afraid if I put weld on top, it's going to hold the tubing up, and then I'll have to go through and grind some of the weld down. So I figure if I just hit these indents here, all I'm leaving is like a few 3/8 inch spots, even quarter at spots, and that's not that big of a deal. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. There's open reliefs here. I'm just going to weld those up and then leave the high spots go. It's going to look pretty sweet, I think. With that on the bottom, that on top. So main seams are welded, but this ain't done yet. Now I gotta work on these reliefs. Couple of them I'm gonna have to open up, like the fourth one down from the top. It's a little tight, so I'll take the cutoff wheel, just open it up a little bit. But I'm gonna fill all the seams up with weld. There it is, all welded up. Now coming up, 11 hours of grinding. Enjoy! Well, that's good enough. Holy crap. Hey, you guys want to see what 3 days of grinding will get you, other than black lung? Bam! It's not perfect, but it's good enough. I could probably throw like 2 or 3 more hours at it and get rest of the pitting out and some of the waviness, but honestly, it's good enough for what it is. In those 3 days, I probably spent about 8 hours grinding and sanding. I am done. Now, is this axle beam done though? I welded the seams and I capped it, like I said. Is this axle beam finished? Ha! I wish, but it's not. Now, I found one more spot that needs some assistance. That's right here at the spindles where they welded their 2 pieces together at. And check those welds out. That was definitely welded on a Friday. The guy said, F it, last one of the day, and he's done. And then I get it. Now, how am I going to reinforce these? Fairly simple. The pieces I cut off from the tube, I'm going to basically just section them on like so. But first I gotta grind these mountains down on both sides. Then I'm gonna take this thing and cut, say, 1/4 to like 3/8 off. Basically take a half round and turn it to like a 1/3 round. And that's just so when it's on here, it's away from the grease fitting. Then I'll probably also take and just section, or not section, but like 45 all 4 corners. That way it doesn't look like I just threw a piece of metal on here. It kind of looks like I threw a designed part on there, like it was meant to be. And then just, you know, hit the high spots and this thing will be finally ready for paint. It will be done then, you know, after these are put on both sides. So, I gotta go and start grinding again. Thank God, like I didn't do enough of that. Ooh. Skittles, my favorite. That was gnarly. Bingo! Final parts. Yay! All right. Here's the beam. here's the patch. The patch goes on like so. I got a little more forming to do because if you can see this, it does not fit quite right. The inside radius here and the outside radius here don't quite line up. It's not hitting the weld yet, but that's just too big of a gap. So I'm gonna throw the one on the floor, hit it with the hammer a few times till it fits a little better. And then ready for weld. About time. Oh. There it is, all welded up. Just need to wire wheel them up, clean them up, sand them down, grind them, hit the high spots, do whatever, and then paint the son of a gun. Now, the only thing I wish the reinforcements were a tad bit taller. I wish they were about 1/8 of an inch away from the top and the bottom. But other than that, I think they'll work fine. It's going to be way better than stock. Right there, officially done. Minus, painting it and putting grease fittings and that back in there. Last thing to do, test fit it. So let's go to the tractor and shove her in. Whoops. So I can hear you guys all ask, hey, why'd you spend all that time on your top reinforcement making it, fit the axle beam when you don't even see any of it? Because I felt like grinding for 3 days, No, just joking. Here's the reason why. The articulation stopping points is the top of the axle to the frame. If I would have went a straight point from outside edge to the center here with my reinforcement, I would probably have to notch my frame just to get the front axle beam mounted into place, let alone notch it even higher to gain some articulation. By deciding to make the reinforcement hug the beam, I still have plenty of space now in between the frame and the beam that I should have all the articulation that I want. I did lose some, but I'm not worried about that. I feel like there's enough. And if I have to, I can just take an angle grinder, cut off wheel, or even a jigsaw and just do like a half round notch to gain some back. But I think I got enough. Okay, I did run into one clearance issue with this front axle setup. This housing is a two-piece housing design. I have the front piece, then you see a gap, and then the back piece. I'm guessing that gap allowed the welded seam on the axle beam to go up in between the two housings when the axle beam articulated. Because right now, trying to articulate the axle, it moves very little, and then the pipe hits these lips on the axle housing. So it'll be a simple fix. All I need to do is remove the housings and then cut off the lip on each of the housing pieces. And then I can bolt it back in there, and that'll allow the axle beam to articulate up past where this lip is then. So I hate to do it, but I'm going to wrap this video up here. The axle beam's basically done. All it needs is some spray paint, and it is officially done. But you don't want to watch me spray paint this stuff. It's like 10 seconds, one coat coverage, just and I'm happy. There's only yay much of the axle beam sticking out of each side, so it doesn't need to look that pretty. But I hope this video gives you some ideas on how, where, and ways that you can improve an axle beam. But just remember, every single one is not the same, and some aren't even worth messing with. So if you got a cheap, chintzy one, get rid of it, get yourself a better one, and start from there. But I do appreciate you guys watching the videos. Leave me a comment, tell me what you like, tell me what you dislike, and let me know what you think. So other than that, thanks for watching, and have a good one. And don't forget to subscribe, because there's like 70 more videos coming out on just the steering system. So thanks again.